Alex stood at the edge of the grand palace courtyard, his back straight, eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The bright twin suns of the alien world beat down upon him, but he hardly noticed. He was a soldier, and soldiers were trained to endure far worse. His armor, though slightly old-fashioned, was his protection and his pride. It had saved his life more times than he cared to count. It was simple, but it worked. Today, he was assigned to the princess, Lyra, who was known throughout the galaxy for her beauty and sharp mind. But what most didn't know was that she had an even sharper tongue. Alex had heard the stories, and he was prepared for the worst. But nothing could have prepared him for what he faced as soon as he stepped foot into her chambers. Princess Lyra, with her delicate silver hair and striking violet eyes, sat on a luxurious chair, looking over a map of her kingdom. Her royal robes shimmered in the sunlight, and she exuded an air of authority that could command armies. But when her gaze landed on Alex, her expression faltered for a moment. She looked him up and down, taking in his armor, then raised an eyebrow. "What is this?" Lyra asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A human soldier here to protect me? You don't look like much. Surely you have better armor back on your home world." Alex stood at attention, doing his best to ignore the sting of her words. He had dealt with worse alien officers who mocked him for his race, fellow soldiers who doubted his abilities. But this felt different. Lyra was a princess, and he had been assigned to protect her. Couldn't show weakness, especially not in front of her. "This armor has served me well, Your Highness," Alex replied, his voice steady. "I'm capable of handling whatever threats come our way." Lyra laughed softly, shaking her head. "A human soldier in that outdated armor? You really think you can protect me from the dangers that lie ahead?" She stood up, her long robes flowing behind her as she walked toward him. "Tell me, soldier, what do you think you're going to do? Run around, firing your tiny human weapons at the invaders?" Alex's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't move. He knew better than to let his emotions show. His training had taught him to stay calm in the face of mockery, to keep his composure no matter what. "I'm here to ensure your safety, princess," he said, his tone firm. "And I will do so, regardless of your opinion." Lyra's laughter continued. "Oh, how noble of you. But I have a better idea," she said, circling around him, her eyes never leaving him. "Why don't you take that ridiculous armor off and show me what you're really made of? Perhaps then I'll take you seriously." Alex's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. He could feel the eyes of her attendants on him, waiting to see what he would do. It was clear that Lyra wasn't just mocking him, she was testing him, seeing how far she could push him before he broke. But Alex wouldn't break. Couldn't. Not now. Not in front of the princess. "I assure you, princess, I don't need to remove my armor to prove my worth," Alex said, lithe. His voice calm, but filled with an underlying tension. Lyra stopped in front of him and crossed her arms. "Oh, you're right," she said. "You don't need to prove anything, but it would make for an interesting show, wouldn't it? Imagine it, the human soldier who couldn't even remove his armor." She turned to her attendants, who giggled softly. The princess's words hit Alex like a slap across the face. He had heard worse insults before, but the way she spoke to him was like he was nothing more than a joke, cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. He had spent years training for this moment, for this mission. His entire purpose here was to protect her. But now she saw him as nothing more than a pathetic man in ill-fitting armor. He felt a rush of anger building inside him. But Alex was no fool. He knew better than to let anger control him. A deep breath, steadied himself, and reminded himself why he was here. He was here to protect the princess, not to prove his worth. But Lyra wasn't done. "What's wrong, soldier?" she asked, a cruel smile on her lips. "Don't want to take it off?" "Don't worry. I'm sure your armor can't be that bad, right?" Alex's fists tightened once more. He could feel his patience running thin. He wasn't a toy for her amusement. He wasn't here to entertain her. "I'm here to do a job, Your Highness," he said, his voice low, barely controlled. "I will protect you, no matter what you think of me." Lyra tilted her head, eyeing him with a look of mock sympathy. "Oh, poor thing," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you? You're just a soldier, and I'm a princess. There's no need for you to play the hero." That was it, the final straw. In one swift motion, Alex reached up, unbuckled his helmet, and slowly, deliberately removed his armor. Piece by piece, he set it down on the floor. The cold metal clanged against the marble tiles, and the sound echoed through the room. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice losing its mocking tone. Alex stood before her, his muscular frame now exposed. He wasn't a perfect soldier. No one was. But in that moment, he felt the weight of his true identity. He wasn't just a man in armor. He was a human, with all his flaws and strengths. And he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Without saying another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving the princess standing in stunned silence. The days after Alex left the palace were long and silent. The once bustling corridors felt emptier without his heavy footsteps echoing against the stone floors. Princess Lyra, though surrounded by her attendants and advisors, felt an unsettling stillness in her life. She had won their little exchange, or so she thought. But something about the way Alex had walked away without a single word troubled her at first. She felt a sense of victory. She had mocked him, tested his patience, and watched him walk out. It had been nothing more than a game for her, a way to pass the time. But now, as the days dragged on, she began to question herself. Alex was not the only one who had endured mockery. Her kingdom had faced wars, enemies, and political strife, and she had been forced to grow up quickly. But this was different. Alex wasn't just any soldier. He was a human soldier, and something about him made her rethink her. Earlier judgment, Princess Lyra sat in her chamber, staring out of the window at the sunset, her violet eyes lost in thought. She had grown used to being the center of attention, used to people bowing to her commands. But now, the thought of Alex walking away from her without a second glance haunted her. He hadn't asked for recognition, nor had he demanded an apology. He simply left. And that, in a way, was the most humiliating thing of all. "How could I have been so foolish?" Lyra muttered to herself. She had been raised to lead, to rule with wisdom and grace, but all she had shown was arrogance. In her youthful pride, she had dismissed Alex's strength and honor without truly understanding the sacrifices he had made in the days that followed. Lyra tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. She continued with her royal duties, meeting with advisors, reviewing the state of the kingdom, and making decisions that affected millions. But in every meeting, there was a quiet space where Alex's absence lingered. She missed the way he had stood firm, ready to face whatever came their way. She missed the calm, unshakable determination in his eyes. She missed the human soldier, not the armor he wore. Meanwhile, Alex had found his way back to the human camp on the outskirts of the kingdom. He had never intended to leave the mission, but after his encounter with the princess, he had needed time to think, time to clear his head. His armor was now neatly stowed in his quarters, left behind not just physically, but symbolically. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He had to remind himself of who he was and why he was here. The human forces stationed on this alien world were small, but they were a tight-knit group. Alex had grown close to many of the soldiers during his time here, and their camaraderie provided him with a sense of peace. But no matter how much he tried to distract himself, his mind often returned to Lyra. What had he expected? Respect, recognition, baby, but he knew better than to expect those things without earning them. He had learned that lesson a long time ago. That night, Alex sat in the mess hall, eating alone as usual. The others around him chatted and laughed, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had come to understand that Lyra's mockery wasn't born out of malice, but from a place of ignorance. She had no idea what it was like to be a soldier, to put your life on the line for a cause that might not even be yours. To sacrifice everything for the good of others. Just as Alex was finishing his meal, a familiar figure approached. Captain Davis, his commanding officer, took a seat across from him. "Long day?" Davis asked with a knowing look. Alex gave a small smile. could say that, just thinking about the princess?" Davis asked, his voice quieter now. Alex nodded. "I can't stop thinking about it. She mocked me, Davis, and I let her. I should have stood my ground." "You did what you had to do," Davis said. "You're not here to please her, Alex. You're here to do a job, and you're doing it well. No one respects a man who doesn't respect himself first. You've got to remind her that she doesn't get to treat you like that." Alex sighed, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. "I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving. I thought she would come to realize her mistake. But now I wonder if I just made things worse." "You didn't make things worse," Davis said firmly. "You did what was right for you. And now it's on her to make things right. You're not her servant, Alex. You're a soldier. Soldiers don't need to beg for respect." Alex leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. He knew Davis was right. He had to stop letting Lyra's words affect him. He had a job to do. He had to focus on the mission, on the safety of the kingdom, and on his fellow soldiers. But he couldn't help but feel like something was missing. He had never been a man of pride, but this was different. The next day, something unexpected happened. Lyra appeared in the human camp, flanked by a few of her royal guards. The soldiers noticed her immediately, and there was a stir of surprise. Alex had heard rumors that she might come, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. He watched from a distance as she spoke with Captain Davis. Her regal demeanor was still intact, but there was a softness in her eyes that wasn't there. Before, she wasn't the same princess who had mocked him days ago. There was something different in the way she carried herself now, something that made Alex wonder if she had come to apologize. Captain Davis saw Alex standing nearby and motioned for him to approach. With a heavy heart, Alex walked over, unsure of what to expect. Lyra turned to face him, her violet eyes meeting his. "Alex," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you." Alex stood still, his heart racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Would she apologize? Would she acknowledge the mistake she had made? "I've had time to think," Lyra began. "I realize now that I was wrong. I treated you with disrespect, and I shouldn't have. I wasn't just mocking your armor. I was mocking you, and that was unfair." Alex didn't say anything. At first, he could see the sincerity in her eyes, the regret in her voice. For the first time, she was not the haughty princess. She was just a person, vulnerable and real. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Lyra continued. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry. You've done your duty. You've protected me, and I didn't even give you the chance to prove yourself." Alex's heart softened. "I understand, princess. Not asking for an apology. I'm just here to do my job." Lyra nodded. "Then let's work together. I need your help, Alex, and I'll prove to you that I'm not the person I was when we first met." Alex looked at her for a long moment. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in days, he felt a spark of hope. The days following the princess's apology were strange, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted. Lyra, though still royal in every way, seemed to be acting differently. She wasn't the same princess who had mocked him with cruel words. Instead, she now showed signs of genuine curiosity. She was beginning to understand what it meant to be a soldier and how much a person could sacrifice. Alex found himself back in the palace, not because of duty, but because he was asked to help. Lyra had asked him to accompany her on a diplomatic mission to another alien world. It was a dangerous mission, one that involved negotiating peace with an alien race that had been hostile for years. The task was simple: make them understand that peace was possible. But Alex knew that it was never that simple. The alien race was powerful, and their distrust of humans ran deep. Despite the tension, Alex remained calm. This was his job, after all. He had been trained to handle situations just like this. But as he stood beside the princess, preparing to meet with the alien leaders, he could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about peace talks anymore. This was about showing Lyra that humans could be trusted, that they were more than just soldiers in outdated armor. They were people with strengths, weaknesses, and hearts full of purpose. Lyra stood next to him, her regal appearance never faltering. Her beauty was undeniable, but now there was a depth to her gaze, something Alex hadn't seen before. She could tell she was nervous. This wasn't just another political meeting for her, this was a test. The eyes of her kingdom and the galaxy were upon her. She had to prove that she was more than just a princess. She had to prove she was a leader. As they entered the negotiation chamber, Alex felt the eyes of the alien leaders on him. He had always been the outsider, the human among many. But now, he could feel that they weren't just looking at him as a soldier. They were looking at him as a symbol of something bigger. The princess had invited him here after all, and that meant something. They would have to respect him, or at least respect his role in her mission. The alien leaders were seated at a long table, their sharp eyes studying Alex and Lyra. There was a tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Lyra spoke first, her voice confident but carrying a hint of uncertainty. "We are here to discuss peace," she began, her eyes scanning the room. "We believe that both our worlds can coexist peacefully, but it will take effort, trust, and a willingness to work together." The alien leaders exchanged glances, their silence filling the room. It was clear that they didn't believe her words. They had long held the belief that humans were nothing more than a threat. But Alex knew that peace wasn't about just words. It was about actions, and he was ready to prove that humanity could be trusted. Lyra continued to speak, but Alex's mind wandered. He couldn't help but think about how far they had come from that day in the palace when she had mocked him. Now they were allies, working together for the good of both their worlds. Out! But even so, Alex still felt a deep-rooted frustration. Princess had tested him, humiliated him in front of her court, and yet here she was, relying on him to help bring about peace. In that moment, something inside him broke. He had tried so hard to prove himself, to show Lyra that he was more than just a soldier in outdated armor, but he had never received the recognition he truly wanted, the kind of respect that would have made him feel like more than just a tool for her political game. Without warning, Alex stood up from his seat, startling everyone in the room. Lyra stopped speaking, her eyes wide with confusion as she turned to look at him. "I've had enough," Alex said, his voice low but steady. "I've tried to prove myself to you, to everyone, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that this is all okay." Lyra's expression changed in an instant. Gone was the confident princess who had mocked him. Now there was only a girl who was uncertain, unsure of what was happening. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand why he had suddenly stood up and declared his frustrations. "Alex, what are you talking about?" With concern, "I'm tired, Lyra," Alex said, shaking his head. "I've given everything for this mission, for you, and yet you've never once seen me as anything other than a tool. You mock me, you dismiss me, and then you want me to fight for you like I'm some kind of machine. I can't do it anymore." Room fell silent. The alien leaders looked between Alex and Lyra, unsure of what was happening. Lyra's face softened, but her shock was evident. She had never seen Alex this vulnerable before, never seen him as anything other than the stoic, calm soldier she had relied on. Now she was seeing a man who was tired, a man who had reached his breaking point. "I never meant to treat you that way," Lyra said softly, stepping closer to him. "I didn't realize how much I was asking of you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I never stopped to think about how you felt. I'm sorry, Alex. I really am." Alex's heart ached at the sincerity in her words, but the damage had already been done. "It's too late for apologies, Lyra," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "I've tried, but I can't keep doing this. Can't keep giving everything I have for someone who doesn't understand." With those words, Alex turned and walked toward the door. He could hear Lyra calling after him, but he didn't stop. His boots echoed through the chamber as he left, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. He couldn't keep sacrificing himself for something that wasn't meant for him, outside. The world seemed quieter, the sounds of the negotiation chamber fading behind him. Alex paused, his breath heavy, his heart still racing. He wasn't sure where he would go, but he knew he couldn't stay here any longer. He needed to find peace, to find a place where he wasn't just a soldier, but a person with his own life. To live, as the doors to the chamber closed behind him, Lyra stood there, her heart sinking. She had lost him, just when she thought she might finally be able to understand him. She had pushed him too far, and now she wasn't sure if she could ever bring him back. The days following Alex's departure were long and filled with silence. Princess Lyra found herself walking through the halls of her palace with an emptiness in her chest that she had never experienced before. Her kingdom was facing new challenges, political tensions rising, and the weight of leadership pressing down on her shoulders. But amidst all of that, all she could think about was Alex, the human soldier who had walked away. At first, she had been sure of herself. She thought that by mocking Alex, she had tested his limits, shown him that she was in control. But now, she realized how wrong she had been. His words echoed in her mind, each one striking her deeper than the last. She had pushed him too far, and he had finally reached his breaking point. The princess knew she couldn't go on like this. She couldn't let her pride stand in the way of doing what was right. Alex had shown her a side of herself she didn't even know existed. Her arrogance had clouded her judgment, and now, because of her foolishness, she had lost someone who had once been willing to risk everything for her safety. She sat in her private chambers, staring out the window at the vast expanse of the galaxy. The stars shimmered in the distance, but they didn't offer her any comfort. The more she thought about Alex, the more she felt like she had failed, had been a symbol of humanity's strength, their dedication to their cause. And now, he was gone. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She looked up, her gaze unfocused, as her trusted advisor, Commander Voss, entered the room. He was a loyal man, one who had served her family for years, but she could see the concern in his eyes as he approached. "Your Highness, are you well?" Voss asked gently, his voice betraying the worry he felt. Lyra sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I've made a terrible mistake, Voss. I pushed him away. I treated him like a fool, and now he's gone." Voss's expression softened, and he took a step closer. "You were testing him, Princess. You didn't understand him at first, but you've learned. He's a soldier, not a servant." "I know that now," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. "But it's too late. I was too proud to see it before, and now I don't know how." "To fix it," Voss paused, thinking for a moment. "Perhaps it's not too late. There is still a chance to mend things. But you must be willing to admit your mistake, and not just to him. You must show the people that you have learned from this." Lyra stood up, walking toward the window again. The words of her advisor echoed in her mind. He was right. She couldn't change the past, but she could change what happened next. She needed to show Alex that she understood, that she respected him, not just as a soldier, but as a person. "I will make it right," Lyra said, determination in her voice. "I will find him, and I will apologize properly. I owe him that." Voss nodded. "I will assist you in any way I can, Your Highness." Lyra turned away from the window, a new sense of purpose filling her. She would not let her pride get in the way of doing what was right. She had treated Alex unfairly, but she wasn't going to let him walk away without at least trying to make amends. It didn't take long for Lyra to track Alex down. She knew where he had gone after leaving the palace, the human camp on the outskirts of the kingdom. It wasn't far, but it felt like a world apart from the royal palace she had grown up in. She had spent so much of her life surrounded by luxury and power, and yet here she was, seeking the forgiveness of a soldier who had nothing but respect for her. Even when she hadn't deserved it, the air was cool as she stepped out of her personal transport, the hum of the engines fading as the door closed behind her. She looked around the camp, the simple tents and barracks standing in sharp contrast to the grandeur of the palace she had called home. There was something humbling about this place, something that made her feel small in a way that she had never felt before. Lyra walked through the camp, her heart beating faster with each step, and the soldiers, who had once regarded her with awe and respect, now looked at her with curiosity. They had heard about her encounter with Alex, and some whispered to one another, wondering what she was doing here. When she finally found him, Alex was sitting alone outside one of the tents. His back against the canvas, his eyes focused on something far off in the distance. He looked different, somehow. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced with a quiet sadness that made Lyra's chest tighten. She took a deep breath and walked over to him, her steps soft on the ground. When she reached him, she stood for a moment, unsure of how to begin. "Alex," she said quietly, her voice catching slightly in her throat. I need to speak with you." Alex didn't look up at first, but after a moment, he slowly raised his head. His eyes were guarded, but there was no anger in them, only a calmness that made Lyra feel even more vulnerable. "I didn't expect you to come," Alex said, his voice low. "I had to," Lyra replied, her voice steady now. "I made a mistake. I treated you like you were nothing, and I was wrong. I've been thinking about it, and I see now how unfair I was." Alex watched her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Lyra felt the weight of his silence, but she didn't look away. She had to do this. She had to apologize. "I was wrong." "To mock you, Alex," Lyra continued. "You've done nothing but your duty, and I treated you like a joke. I'm sorry. I was foolish, and I should have never disrespected you." Alex took a deep breath, his eyes softening. "It's not just about the apology, Lyra," he said quietly. "It's about understanding. It's about respect. I don't expect you to change overnight, but I hope that, someday, you'll see me for who I am, not just the armor I wear." Lyra nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "I do see you, Alex. I see you now." There was a long pause, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, Alex stood up, his posture straight and strong. "Thank you, Princess. That's all I needed to hear." Lyra smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Then I'll see you at the palace," she said softly as she turned to leave. Alex called out to her. "Lyra, one more thing." She stopped and looked back at him. "Yes. Next time, don't make the mistake of underestimating a soldier," Alex said with a half smile. Lyra laughed, the sound light and free. "I won't." And with that, she left the camp, knowing that this wasn't the end of her journey. But it was a step in the right direction. The next few weeks were a time of uneasy peace. Princess Lyra had returned to her duties. And although she tried to push past the events of the past, a lingering doubt stayed with her. Alex's words haunted her, and she began to notice things. About the way she led, the way she treated others, that she had never seen before. She had thought herself to be a strong and capable leader, but now she wasn't so sure. Alex had gone back to the human camp, continuing his mission. He was still a soldier, and though the rift between him and the princess had been mended, the distance between them remained. Lyra could feel it. She had apologized, but some things couldn't be undone so easily. Alex was still a human soldier, and she was still a princess. There were boundaries between them, and no matter how much she wished it, they could never truly be equals, or so she thought. But the world had other plans. A new threat loomed over the kingdom. The rival alien race. That had been a constant problem for the kingdom's peace talks, had become more aggressive. Lyra's advisors told her that it was only a matter of time before they would launch an attack, and the kingdom would be forced into war once more. She knew that if they were to survive, they needed more than just her royal status. They needed strength, they needed bravery, and most importantly, they needed unity. But how could she expect unity when there was so much distrust? How could she expect her people to stand together when even she had failed to understand the very ones she had depended on? Lyra sat in her chamber, the heavy weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The battle ahead seemed impossible. She needed Alex's help, but she wasn't sure how to ask. She had humbled herself before, but she had never truly depended on someone else in this way. She had always been the one others turned to for strength, but now she was the one who needed help. At last, after hours of pacing, Lyra made her decision. She had to put her pride aside once and for all. She couldn't face this battle alone. Not anymore. Alex was sitting outside the camp, the cool breeze running through his hair. He had been deep in thought, running through his memories, his time, serving in the military, and the journey that had brought him here. He had come to terms with his role in the mission, but his heart still weighed heavy. He had hoped things would be different with Lyra, but he had learned not to expect anything. People were who they were, and sometimes no amount of apology could change that. As he sat there, a familiar figure approached from the distance. At first, he didn't recognize her, but as she grew closer, Alex could see the crown glinting in the sunlight and the unmistakable air of royalty surrounding her. Princess Lyra. His heart skipped a beat, but he kept his expression neutral, unsure of why she had come. She had already apologized, so what was left to say? Lyra stopped in front of him, her violet eyes filled with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. She wasn't the same confident princess he had met before. Now, there was a quiet strength in her that he hadn't noticed earlier. "I need your help," Lyra said, her voice steady but tinged with a hint of hesitation. Alex raised an eyebrow, surprised by her directness. "Help? What kind of help?" Took a deep breath. "My kingdom is in danger. The alien forces we've been negotiating with have become more aggressive. The peace talks have failed, and it looks like war is coming. I need a soldier, and I need you." She paused for a moment, her gaze softening. "I was wrong before, Alex. I couldn't have done this without you. I need you to help me fight for my people." For a moment, Alex stood there in silence. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had come, he didn't know how to respond. He had fought for so long, for so many, and yet there was something about Lyra's words that struck him deeply. She wasn't asking him to fight because she saw him as a soldier. She was asking because she had come to realize that he was more than that. He was a person she respected. Alex took a step forward, his voice calm, but filled with purpose. "I'm not just a soldier, Lyra. You've learned that the hard way, and I've learned it too. But if you want my help, you need to understand something. You can't lead a kingdom without seeing your people. You can't fight a war without knowing who you're fighting for." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, and I will never make that mistake again. I see you now, Alex. I see what you've sacrificed, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Then we fight. Not just for your kingdom, but for the people we've all forgotten." Lyra's face softened, and a small smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you." The next day, they gathered the human forces and the royal guards in a meeting hall. The atmosphere was tense, and everyone knew what was coming. The alien forces had finally revealed their true intentions. They weren't interested in peace anymore. They wanted power, and they wouldn't stop until they had control. Alex stood at the front of the room, his armor gleaming under the bright lights. But this time, it wasn't just the armor that gave him strength. It was the bond he had forged. With Lyra, the mutual respect they now shared. "Listen up," Alex called out, his voice carrying across the room. "We're not here to fight a war for glory. We're here because we have something worth fighting for. These aliens want to take what we've built, but they'll never succeed, not as long as we stand together." Lyra stepped forward, her gaze steady and unwavering. "I may be a princess, but I'm not above any of you. We fight for our future, for our families, for each other." The soldiers and guards exchanged glances, their resolve hardening. Lyra had proven that she was a leader, someone who understood their struggles, their sacrifices. And now, they were willing to follow her into battle. Alex turned to Lyra, his eyes meeting hers. There was no longer any doubt in his heart. Together, they would face whatever came next. The war would be hard, but they weren't alone anymore. They had each other. "Let's make this count," Alex said, his voice steady with purpose. Lyra nodded. "Together." The morning of the battle arrived, and the sky over the kingdom was a dull gray, heavy with the weight of what was to come. The armies had gathered, human and alien forces, ready to face off against the enemy that had threatened their peace for so long. The air was thick with tension, but also with an unexpected sense of unity. Lyra and Alex stood side by side, their resolve unwavering. In the weeks leading up to this day, they had worked together tirelessly to prepare their forces. Lyra had visited the human camp every day, gaining the trust of Alex's comrades, learning what it meant to be a soldier. Alex, in turn, had spent time in the royal palace, understanding the weight of leadership, and seeing the challenges Lyra faced in balancing the needs of her people. They had come to understand each other in a way that went beyond their differences. It wasn't about her being a princess or him being a soldier anymore. They were partners, united by a shared goal, the survival of their people. As the two armies stood facing each other on the battlefield, Alex could feel the familiar weight of his armor, but it wasn't just the armor that protected him. He had something far stronger now: confidence. And Lyra, standing beside him, had become more than just a leader. She had become a symbol of hope for her people, a person they could rely on. Together, they had built something that would help them win this war. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, his voice calm but filled with determination. Lyra nodded, her eyes sharp and focused on the enemy lines. "We're not just fighting for today. We're fighting for the future. We've already lost too much." The enemy, a powerful alien race that had long been an enemy of both Lyra's kingdom and the humans, stood across the field. Their ships hovered in the distance, ready to attack at a moment's notice. But Alex could see something in their ranks. Doubt. They had underestimated the humans. And they had certainly underestimated Lyra's kingdom. For the first time, Alex felt the weight of the coming battle without fear. He wasn't afraid of what was to come. What scared him more was what would happen if they failed. The world he had come to love, Lyra's world, was at stake. Couldn't let them lose. The sound of marching footsteps echoed through the field, and the battle began. Lyra's royal guard, who had once been loyal to her as a figurehead, now fought beside the humans, their courage and resolve growing with each passing hour. The enemies who once mocked the humans and their outdated weapons were now running in fear, their confidence shaken. Alex could see the soldiers of both sides fighting with everything they had, but it wasn't just about weapons or strategy anymore. It was about the bond they had built. As the battle raged on, Lyra moved to the front lines. Alex had expected her to stay back, to lead from behind, but he realized she wasn't just the princess anymore. She was a leader in every sense of the word, standing with her people, sharing in the fight. She fought beside them, showing the same strength and determination she had shown in their training. "You're not staying behind anymore, are you?" Alex asked, smiling as he noticed her on the front lines, leading a group of soldiers. Lyra glanced at him, her face set in determination. "I can't ask my people to fight if I'm not willing to do the same. They need to see that I believe in this just as much as they do." The sight of her fighting alongside him made Alex proud. He had never imagined that the princess he had once struggled to respect would one day become the very leader who would unite their forces. Hours passed, and the battlefield slowly began to shift. The enemy, once confident in their numbers and strength, began to falter. Lyra's leadership and Alex's experience in the field were starting to show results. The enemy lines broke, and their forces began to retreat. Alex stood tall, watching the enemy scatter, but there was no time for celebration. The battle wasn't over yet. He turned to Lyra, his voice low but urgent. "We need to make sure they don't regroup. They'll come back if we don't finish this now." Lyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Lead the way. You can't let them win." With Alex at the forefront, Lyra's royal guard and the human forces pushed forward, chasing down the retreating enemies. The sound of clashing weapons, shouts, and explosions filled the air as they fought to bring the battle to its final, victorious conclusion. As the day wore on, the battle finally began to die down. The enemy had been pushed back, their forces scattered and defeated, but there was still no sign of surrender. Alex and Lyra stood at the center of the battlefield, their faces covered in sweat and dust, but their spirits high. "We did it," Lyra said, her voice full of disbelief and triumph. Alex looked around at the battlefield, where the smoke and dust were beginning to settle. "We did it together." Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "I couldn't have done it without you. You were right. This is what unity looks like." Alex smiled, a genuine smile this time. "This is what respect looks like," he said softly. The two of them stood there, taking in the sight of their victory. It was a victory not just of arms but of spirit. They had fought together, united by a common cause. And it was that unity that had led them to success. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Alex and Lyra looked out over the battlefield. It had been a long and difficult journey, but it had been worth it. They had proven to each other and to their people that when they stood together, they were unstoppable. Lyra turned to Alex, a look of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Alex, for everything." Alex nodded, his voice steady. "We're not done yet, but this is a start." As the two of them walked back to the camp, the sound of cheers filled the air. They had won, but the real victory was the trust and respect they had gained for one another. It was a new beginning, not just for their kingdoms, but for their friendship, one built on honor, understanding, and unity.